right, thanks so much, Don. Thank you for having me. Thanks, everybody, for coming. My name's Andy Granowitz. I work on Google Analytics. I've been there for a little over a year now. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Google Analytics, web analytics as a whole. For those, just in case you don't know, Google Analytics is a free product offered by Google. It tells you pretty much anything you need to know about your website, where your visitors came from, what they did while they were there, where they exited from, how long they were there for, and so forth and so on. So, with that, I'd like to ask you guys, how many of you guys are GA users? I actually saw one person over there had GA open, which is great to see. Okay, so most of you guys are GA users. Okay, and would you consider yourselves beginners, intermediate? Beginners? Yeah, any intermediate? Anyone brave enough to say they're an advanced user? Okay, we got one in the back. Yeah, okay. Cool. And mostly, are you guys marketers or entrepreneurs, developers, webmasters? Trying to see. Yeah, anybody? Developers, webmasters. Okay, so we got a little more technical crowd. It's always good to see the people who are actually implementing GA. And is there anything that in particular that you guys are looking to get out of the presentation today? Just looking. A couple of the features. Any in particular? Okay, so a request for landing pages versus exit pages, absolutely. Any others? Yeah. Okay, so to move beyond just how many visits per day. We are definitely going to go beyond visits per day. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Okay, that's great. So giving other people access and making sure that the right people get the right data. This is all great stuff. Any others? Yeah. PDFs, yes, that's a good one. Definitely. Yeah. Custom reports. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay, well, I think we've got a good mix. We'll definitely talk about all of that stuff. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about today is Google Analytics, pretty much from data collection through analysis and then ultimately up to action. So how does data get into Google Analytics? How do you analyze it, and how can you then take action from it? So I'm not going to start talking about data collection because that could be a little bit more technical, nitty-gritty. I'm going to talk about some cool things, come back, talk about how to implement it and how it works, and then a few more cool things, Q&A, and all the stuff that we just mentioned. So a brief about the history of Google Analytics. In 2005, Google acquired Urchin Software. In typical Google fashion, typically made it free, available to everybody, renamed it Google Analytics. Definitely followed the Google launch and iterate strategy where rapid development and continued innovation in the product area. So you could see that it's evolved over time to eventually become what it is today in 2012. So if you ask the average guy walking down the street or even your grandmother, what is Google known for? What would they say? They'd probably say search, right? Yeah. So caveat, these are third-party numbers, not official Google numbers, but what percentage of searches would you say happen on Google? Any guesses? 85%? 90? 89? Okay, so it's actually 67%. Okay, I see some people high-fiving each other in the back there. Yeah. Now, for comparison, Google Analytics, what percentage of people use Google Analytics as their primary web analytics provider? Any guesses? 80? Yeah, so it's 82%. So it's pretty interesting when you compare it to Google Search. It's on about 60% of the internet. All the top names that you can think of, the White House, Huffington Post. It has native integrations with WordPress, Blogger, Tumblr, many of the most popular blogging platforms. So if you use a blog, then there's a good chance that you're using Google Analytics. So it's really everywhere from the big guys to the mom and pop shops. So now I want to talk a little bit about how we interact with web technologies today. So typically, and not only how we interact with them, but why it's important that we think about it this way, how Google Analytics collects data on these behaviors, and how you can ultimately take action based on that. So typically we'll take out some device, whether it's a mobile device, a tablet, a laptop, a desktop computer. We will open up the internet, go to a browser. If we're on a mobile phone, we might open up an app. From the browser, we'll go to Google to search for something. We'll go to Facebook or Twitter or open up our email, something like that. And then ultimately, we'll land on the website that we're interested in or that we're going to. So I'll talk about each one of these processes, how Google Analytics collects data on them, and things that you can do with that data. So we'll start with the device. So conversion rate, again, these are third-party numbers. Conversion rate is defined as the percent of visits where a conversion happens. A conversion is, typically in an e-commerce setting, would be a transaction. If you're not an e-commerce website, then it's some sort of important action that you want to happen on your site. So what is the primary goal for visitors coming to your website? So that's a conversion. It might be a PDF download. It might be spending more than 5 minutes on the site, hitting more than 10 pages, whatever it might be. But in the most typical sense for e-commerce, it's a transaction. So this is the average desktop conversion rate among people on desktops across the internet. Any guesses? What, sorry? 80? Okay. And so this is the percent of visits that include that have a conversion in them. So I hear 10%, 1%? 1%? 1/10 of 1%. Okay. So it's not quite that bad. It's about 2%. Okay. Now, by comparison, what's the conversion rate on iPads? 7, 8, 80? Yeah? Any other guesses? Okay. So it's about 3.8%, so nearly double that on desktop. And what's interesting about this is only about 16% of businesses do usability testing on iPads. So usability testing is testing to make sure that people can find what they're looking for and it's usable. By comparison, that number is closer to about 30% for mobile. So clearly there's an opportunity on iPads that people might not be taking advantage of. So potentially a higher value medium. But having said that, what's the problem with this study on conversion rates? So where's the flaw, in particular, as it relates to your business or your website? Okay, that's a great one. How many iPad users are there? If the volume is significantly less, it doesn't really matter. Any others? Okay, so if you're providing an informational website, you don't care about conversions. So I'm gonna say that if you are providing an informational website, then you need to find your goals. You know, what is it that you want people to do on that website? Is it download the PDF? Is it spend find 2 more pages than they would have normally? So people do track conversions even in non-e-commerce settings, but that's definitely a good one to think about. Any other ideas why I don't love this study? People shop, yeah, so definitely a volume thing. So actually it's that's definitely part of it, but it's also that this is the average across the entire internet. So your business, your website is going to be totally different. So it's definitely a volume thing. Your volume might be different on these different devices, but also it could be totally swapped. It could be that people don't convert as much on the iPad on your website as they do in the internet as a whole. So with you should use your data with Google Analytics. You can find exactly what the conversion rate is across devices and see how visitor behavior differs across each device. In addition, you want to make sure that you optimize for your most popular devices. So a new report that we've recently launched in Google Analytics is called the Browser Size Report. So in this report, you can see the white area. 98% of visitors can see in their browser, given how large their browser is or how big their device is, the browser in the device can see what's in the white area, and you can adjust that. So if there's a particular button that you want people to click on and only half of your users are seeing it, then you have a problem. So you can use the browser size report to make sure that you're optimizing for whatever your most high value devices are. So we talked a little bit about devices. So you take out your device, you've opened up your laptop or turned on your tablet, and now we open up the browser. You could also open up an app. I'm going to save that for later. That's important enough to get its own section. So you could do a similar analysis with browsers, right? You could say, what is the conversion rate across different browsers? Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, so forth. But there's something that you could do a little bit more tactical in Google Analytics when it comes to browser behavior. So what I have here is I've set up what's called a custom alert. And what I have it triggered is that if on a particular day I see less than 10 transactions coming from Chrome, it will send me an email. You could even configure it to send you a text message. So if you implement something new and it breaks in a particular browser, you don't want to be the last to know about it. And time is really money, so if your website is down, then you're losing money. So you want to know right away. And it doesn't have to be a browser. This could actually be for anything, for a particular device. It doesn't have to be transactions. You could set it for any threshold for a metric that is different for your particular website. And the other thing is you don't have to set it to be something negative. You could also set it to be if it hits above a certain threshold. So when your website goes viral, you'll also know about it. So I'm going to pause for a minute. Any questions on what we've talked about so far? Yeah. What's the conversion rate on iPhone or Android? So the particular study that I looked at did not have those figures. And like I said, I'd be cautious to even look at that across the industry. We could potentially jump into a demo in a few minutes to look at Google Store data, which is we'll talk more about that in a minute, and we can see what it is on a particular device on a particular website. Any other questions about either devices or browsers? Okay. So now we've we've opened up our browser, and we go to Google or Facebook or Twitter or Gmail. But it's not just search and social, right? There's a ton of different traffic channels. So it's very important to understand both where your traffic is coming from and how visitor behavior differs across each one of these channels. There's a lot of channels out there. Paid search, known as SEM or search engine marketing, organic search, SEO, search engine optimization, display, affiliate, social, email, direct, offline. There's a lot of different traffic channels. It's important to understand each one. So I'm going to talk a little bit about search, about social. So here we have Google search. This might be a little bit of a recap for some people here. And I've searched for a Google t-shirt. I want to buy a Google t-shirt. So that's called the search query. Then we have the organic results, the organic listings, which are served up by Google's search algorithm, free of charge. Whatever Google decides they think is the most relevant result for that particular query. And then you have the paid results, which come through AdWords, which is an auction-based system. So I'm going to ask you, here we have the Google Analytics blog. Does anybody read the Google Analytics blog? Okay. We got one. Even the advanced user says only sometimes. So it's a great blog. I love it. I read it all the time. Not everybody reads it, but if you had to guess, how many unique search queries or different keywords that people entered led traffic to the Google blog in 1 month? So in other words, if I search for Google Analytics and I click on the Google blog, that would count as 1. If I search for Google Analytics blog, that would count as 2. So how many do you think in a 1 month time period different unique search queries led traffic to the Google Analytics blog that even some of the advanced users, I'm sorry to say, so even don't read the Google Analytics blog? 1,000? 50? 10? 1,200? Some people are saying more, some people are saying less. 1201. 1201, yeah. $1, yeah. Okay, so it's actually 21,000. Yeah, and this is just in a 1-month time period. So I will give credit. I stole this parlor trick from my friend and colleague Phil Mui, who actually came here last year to talk at this same venue. He talks about this in even more detail. But the question is, so why is this significant, aside from being totally a mismatch of what we expected? So there's a few reasons. First of all, looking at the search queries that lead traffic to your site give you direct insight into why people are trying to find your site in the first place. They're literally telling what they're looking to find and then click on something to come to your site. So it's especially interesting in what's referred to as the long tail, or especially the keywords that don't lead to as much traffic, but it's very interesting to sift through and try and understand why people are trying to find your website. The second reason is for search engine marketing. So how many people do search engine marketing and use AdWords? Okay, so only a few. But it's important to have coverage across all the keywords that are driving traffic to your website. So when you have an ad for a particular keyword, you control the message. So instead of it being whatever Google decides that should portray, you decide exactly what you're going to write. In addition, studies have shown that Google has conducted that having a paid result side by side and organic result really work very well in tandem together, and you get additional incremental value from having that as opposed to one or other in isolation. So there's a few reasons why that's significant. And if you don't believe me, there's the screenshot from Google Analytics showing all the different keywords that lead traffic to Google Analytics blog. And I highly recommend it for beginner or intermediate or advanced. Check it out. Yes? I would say it's neither. It's not necessarily a good thing. Thank you for reminding me in the back to repeat the question. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing to have that many keywords? And I would say it's neither good nor bad. It's just important to understand it, important to understand all of the different queries that are leading traffic to your site. So you see that a lot of them are very similar, Google Analytics blog, but then the fifth one there is totally different, absolute unique visitors. So already there's a significant variation. Yeah.
The only thing about the previous slide that I was thinking, connecting it to another site and saying, was that going to work getting to your site, would be the fact that those go to this site, but you wouldn't necessarily pop up. Another site wouldn't necessarily pop up under that many words. The Google site does, but another site wouldn't quite have that many words brought to it, right? Because it was so narrow.
So I guess the question is, it's really with all these different keywords, there's only so many. These, when you're searching for things, it's not going to lead to some other site. It's only going to lead to the Google Analytics blog. Yeah, that's a great point. It might not so much be a competition for other sites, but I think it still provides very interesting insight. For example, before I looked at this, I would not have guessed that absolute unique visitors would have been the 5th most popular term that led traffic to the Google Analytics blog. So I think it still provides great insight, even if some of these terms won't lead traffic to any other website on the internet. Yes? This is all Google Analytics so far. So in order to access this particular data, you need to have access to the Google blog analytics account. So it's not publicly available. It's just available to me. But this is all Google Analytics, not Webmaster Tools. Okay, any questions before we move on? Well, so now we'll go on to social. So Avinash Kaushik, does anybody heard of Avinash? He's a friend of ours. He's a web analytics rock star. So he said social media is like teen sex. Everybody wants to do it. Nobody actually knows how. When finally done, they're surprised it's not better. So Avinash said this. It's a funny quote, but the truth is that social media has become a pretty significant traffic driver, significant enough that we can no longer ignore it or say funny things about it. But so Google Analytics actually automatically categorizes 450 different social networks, more than just Facebook and Twitter and Google+. So there's a real long tail out there that drive traffic, and one thing I've observed is that some websites will have a few random social networks that, for whatever reason, drive a lot of traffic to them. But we don't just want to look at vanity metrics when we're looking at social media. So things like retweets and likes and plus ones, those are great. But what we really want to do is connect it to some value. So what we have here is a new visualization within Google Analytics. So the top outermost circle shows 20,000 conversions to our website total. Then the one in the middle shows that there were 11,000 conversions that social was a touch point at some point in that conversion. So you might have visited from social and then come back a week later, 2 days later, and then converted. So social was a part of 11,000 of those conversions. And 2,000 were a direct result of a social visit. So I visited Facebook, came to the Stanford website, and converted, whether that means downloading a PDF file or whatever it might be. And 2,000 of those were a direct result of social. So what we're trying to do is we don't just want to look at total number of tweets or fans or whatever else. We want to actually tie social to a direct value that it's having on our website. So we talked a little bit about search. We talked a little bit about social. I'm going to talk about one more of these, and it's actually one that you might not expect. I want to talk about offline. So how can we track offline campaigns in Google Analytics? So what do I mean by an offline campaign? I mean a poster on the wall, a advertisement in print in a newspaper or a magazine, or a giant QR code in Times Square. So this is Times Square, the busiest intersection in the U.S., and I think this was about 2 years ago, as part of Internet Week, New York City decided to put a massive QR code. So this is how you know that the geeks have taken over. Giant QR code in Times Square. So how can you use a QR code to track your offline campaigns? So when you scan a QR code, it will give you a URL that will then direct you to some website and take you there. So with Google Analytics, you can tag your campaigns. So there's a tool where you type in the URL the page that you want the campaign to go to. You type in the source, the medium, the name. In this case, I typed in Times Square, massive billboard, which is a technical term, and the park campaign. And I point this URL, which will go to whatever website I entered, in the QR code. That will explicitly tell Google Analytics where this traffic came from. So the user will have no idea that this is happening. They'll just scan the QR code, but Google Analytics will be able to pick up where that traffic came from. And this can be used not just for offline campaigns, but online email campaigns as well, anything that you want to send additional detail. If you have an email campaign, Google Analytics will be able to detect, hey, this is traffic coming from Gmail, but it won't know that it's the August 2012 tech briefing campaign. So you can use this to do that. For offline campaigns, other techniques are vanity URLs. So you set up a one-time URL that redirects to the site that you're going to. Other techniques are URL shorteners. That's often used for these purposes as well. So you can even figure out how much traffic is coming from offline campaigns with Web Analytics. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about each one of these areas. Pause for any questions. Yeah.
What happens if the user types in or pastes the URL directly?
Yes, so if the question was, what if somebody types in or pastes directly into the browser a URL? Another example of that would be if they have it bookmarked. So that would actually show up in Google Analytics as direct. It would say direct traffic. So a lot of traffic is direct on the internet, and I probably should have put that as one of the traffic sources because it is a large driver, direct traffic, and you should understand that as well. So that's a great question. Any other questions here? Okay. So we've opened up our device, our cell phone, our laptop. We've gone to the browser, gone to Google, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, and we finally land on the website. So all of this before we've even landed on the website. And Google Analytics, the data is all there. So I'm going to take this opportunity to get a little bit more technical now and talk exactly how Google Analytics actually works, how Google Analytics collects data. Just bear with me if you don't follow, that's okay, but it could give you a richer understanding of the data that's actually coming in to Google Analytics. So you open up your device and the website loads. Google Analytics is a small snippet of JavaScript that's put on the source code of your page. When ready, the GA JavaScript will load. It does a lot of things. The first thing that it does is it looks for a Google Analytics first-party cookie. If there's not one there, it'll write a first-party cookie to the browser. If there is one there, it will read it, so it knows that you're a returning visitor as opposed to a new visitor. It will then collect a whole bunch of information, things like the browser, the source. If it's from a Google search, it'll collect the keyword. It'll collect all of that information, and even everything up till is there Java support turned on in the browser, everything, the language, location, so forth and so on. It'll put all of that in a GIF request, a request for a small 1x1 transparent pixel, sometimes referred to as a tracking pixel. And it will request that from googleanalytics.com. In that, data will be logged in the Google Analytics servers. From there, Google Analytics will then, in our backend, will process all of that data, make sense of it, turn it into something meaningful, and then we will eventually expose that data through the user interface or through the API. So I'm going to talk a little bit just about step 2C there. So here's an example GIF request. This is what it looks like. I don't know if you guys use any web debugging tools, but you can actually see the request made to Google Analytics. So it has all this information, a bunch of different query parameters that Google Analytics uses to identify all of these various dimensions. So from this comes a whole wealth of dimensions. And this is not a complete list. I think there's something like over 200 different ways that you can slice and dice your data. So everything from the source and the original refer to the pages that we're seeing and the city and so forth and so on. It also constructs metrics from this, so things like time on site, there's timestamps that are passed, and so forth and so on. So that's a little bit behind the scenes under the hood how Google Analytics actually works to collect data. Okay, so we're back to, we've landed on the website, and we had talked, one of the requests I know someone said at the beginning was to hear a little bit about what happens when you actually land on the site, landing pages and things like that. So one of the most well-known web analytics metrics is bounce rate. So have people heard of bounce rate? A lot of people have. Anybody actually know what it is? Yeah, okay, all right, a lot of people know. Yeah. So for those who don't know, it is the percentage of visitors or visits who come to the website and then immediately leave. So you actually want a lower bounce rate. A lower bounce rate means that people come and they stay on your website. So here I have the keyword report, various keywords that led traffic to the Google store. And I guess now is a better time than any to talk briefly about the Google store, just because it's a demo account that we like to use. It sells Google merchandise, so T-shirts and other miscellaneous Google branded stuff. It's not so heavily trafficked. As you can see, I think it does about 20 transactions per day, something like that, but it's fun. So you see here are all the keywords that people use to get to the Google store. And you can see, based on that there's actually varying degrees of bounce rates here. So Google T-shirt, the bounce rate was about 46%, so that means about 46% of the people that came via this Google T-shirt, typed Google T-shirt into Google, and came to the Google store, about 46% of them immediately left. For people that typed in Google and found the Google store, 82% of them immediately left. So you can see that there actually is quite a big difference between these keywords. So the reason why people like bounce rate so much is you can measure it against so many different dimensions and really see which is a very good indicator very quickly which is driving traffic that's really good, high value. People aren't just immediately leaving. Yeah. Immediately. That's a great question. I've been intentionally a little bit vague. So it is typically defined as you only see one page. So one page loads, and then you leave. So it detects if you leave if you don't reload another page. So back to that slide, how does Google Analytics actually work? When the page loads, right, that's when Google Analytics fires. So if it sees no other page load, then it knows that you've left. If you're interested in the nitty-gritty details, it waits actually 30 minutes to make sure that you're actually gone. And you can adjust that if it's different for your website. Yeah. Yes. So they are done on page load, and you guys are great because you're getting to my next topic, which is what's wrong with bounce rate. So what's the problem with this everyone's favorite web metric? And it relates exactly to what you guys are asking about. Sorry? You left work to go home, but you're interested in that site, so you might come back later. That's a great one. Yeah. Exactly. Maybe you went to the first page and you found what you needed. So it's not really a failure because you found exactly what you needed on the very first page. Another idea? I was going to say the same thing. Yeah. Yeah. You're still reading. Yeah, you're just reading. So these are all things that are wrong with bounce rate. You guys got it exactly right. It's very possible that as bounce rate is defined, which is a single page view visit, it's very possible that that's actually a successful visit for you. Whether it's you're coming back or whether you've done something on the site that indicates this, it's actually a successful visit. So Google Analytics has a way to get around this. So as you said, Google Analytics only sends data to Google servers on page load, but you can actually configure it to send additional data with some other action on your site. So if, for example, you click and you maybe share it via email. So maybe the page hasn't reloaded, but you've shared an article via email. You can trigger that to send data to Google Analytics, and that will say, okay, this was not a bounce because he sent an email when he was on this page. So that's no longer a not successful visit for us because they clearly read the content and sent an email to somebody. So it's no longer a bounce. Similarly, if you were just reading, we actually had an article recently on the Google Analytics blog that talked about how to do this, where you can set a timer. So if someone spends, say 20 minutes on the site, then there's a pretty good chance that they read some content or they're doing something, and you can then send some data to Google Analytics and say that is not a bounce. That was a successful visit for me. Yes. Yes. Can you track whether or not the user prints the page? The answer is yes, depending on the print mechanism. So all of these things are things you can track. Which actually is a great segue into the next thing is what are the on-site actions that you can track? So here we have a page. This is again from the Google store. It's selling a big Google beanbag. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can track on this page, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that if you were to land on this page and do stuff, you might consider it at least a successful visit or probably not a bounce. So for example, if you enlarge the image and play around with that and stuff like that, so that's, the page is not reloading, but that indicates some interest in the beanbag, in which case you might say, okay, that's not a bounce. This was not completely wasted because they showed some sort of interest. So there's a lot of things here. So I'm going to go through just a few of them. So there's outbound links. So there's often links that lead away from your website to other websites that you are not tracking with Google Analytics, and you can actually have an event fire on click, and you will be able to track where people are actually leaving your website. So there's site search if people search internally for something. E-commerce, of course. So how much are people spending? Any important on-site actions, any dynamic page content if it's loading. You can track user-provided data, so if you're form fields. Interactions, so whatever technologies you use for that, Flash, Ajax. And then also metadata on the page that might not be reflected in the URL or the page title. So, this is the home page and the fun category of pages. So just because we can track all these activities doesn't mean that we should. Right? So there's a lot you can track. A lot of people get carried away and literally just want to track everything without thinking about what they're actually going to do with it or how to make that data actionable in some way. So it's actually a pretty deep question that leads to when you start to think about what it is that you want to track on your site. You have to determine, what am I actually doing online in the first place? Why is my website online? What do I want my visitors to accomplish? What website actions indicate success, and what website actions might not be, I would consider a success, but lead or contribute to success in the future. So it really gets down to the core of why are you online in the first place. And it also helps answer a question that I get pretty frequently, which is, why are there so many metrics? We saw the list of dimensions, there's just as many metrics. Does anything matter other than the conversion rate? Right? How many conversions are happening on my site? And we saw that it was about 2% on average, 5%. So the answer is, if you're just looking at conversion rate, you're throwing away 95% of your data. And there's a lot of interesting things that happen in that 95% that we should be concerned with. So when you think about it this way, there's this concept that we like to talk about known as micro conversions and macro conversions. So a macro conversion would be something like a purchase or something that's the gold standard for what you want people to do on your website. Micro conversions are other things that might lead to the macro conversion. So doing some research, visiting a particular page, maybe registering an account, emailing something to somebody, signing up for a newsletter, things like that. So it goes back to, what are you doing online? What website actions indicate success? Start to think about that. The term in Google Analytics is goals, so you can track those as goals, and you can start to get conversion rate even for things that aren't, say, direct transactions. So now I'm going to talk about a few of these on-site actions that might indicate success or just in general things that are worth tracking on your website. So we've landed on the website now. And the first is internal site search. So the internal search bar on your website. So if external site search, like Google search, tells you what people are looking for when they come to your website, internal site search tells you exactly what it is they're looking for on your website. So not why were they there, but what are they actually doing there now that you're here. And they literally, people type into your search bar what they're looking for, which is exactly what you want to know as a website owner. So here I am on the Google store, and they sell YouTube socks. So tube socks branded YouTube. Get it? YouTube socks. So yes, see some people facepalm back there. But so they're actually a popular item on the Google store. So I searched for YouTube socks. You'll notice that in the URL, there's a query parameter. It's Q equals YouTube socks. So in Google Analytics, what you would do is you would say, hey, whenever you see that in the URL, whenever you see Q equals something in the URL, that's an internal site search, so I want you to pick that up. At which point Google Analytics, whenever it sees that, will know that the user has searched for YouTube socks. So, Google 8-bit Maps. Does this look familiar to anybody? Google 8-bit Maps? One person? A couple of people? So Google is famous for their April Fool's jokes. So this year, one of the more popular April Fool's jokes was they announced that they were having Google Maps for Super Nintendo. And it was rendered in 8 bits, and it was complete with the Super Nintendo video game theme music. And they had a video of someone putting it in the Super Nintendo system and playing around with Google Maps. And not only that, but they actually rendered all of Google Maps in this 8-bit format. So you can play around with it and see all of Google Maps in 8 bits. So the internet had a good time with this one. Someone on Reddit said, I don't get it, how is this usable? Would Google do all of this just for fun? The answer is yes, it was all just for laughs. So it's a pretty fun time of year at the Googleplex around April. So what does any of this have to do with internal site search? That's what we were talking about, right? So I was perusing the Google Store account, and I noticed that right around April 1st, there's a big spike in searches, internal site searches for maps and things like that, and I didn't know why. So there's a lot going on. You could see the date range there spans before April 1st and then about 18 days after, and we're looking at the internal site search report. And then I saw Google Maps 8-bit, and I said, oh yeah, the April Fool's joke. So there are no 8-bit maps, merchandise, or anything like that sold on the Google Store. So 1,500 searches might not seem like a lot, but considering the Google store does about 20 transactions per day, I think we might have missed a little opportunity to sell some funny T-shirts here. So it gives you pretty good insight into why people are coming to your website, and I'll have to call up the Google store owner and tell him this one. Okay, so does anybody know this data visualization? Yeah, it's become pretty famous now, which is pretty cool. So it's a Sankey diagram. It shows Napoleon's march on Russia. So Edward Tufte, who's a pioneer in the data visualization field, called this what he thinks might be the best statistical graph ever drawn. So it's a pretty high praise from a guy like Edward Tufte. So what is this? It's a flow diagram. Sankey diagrams are very commonly used to show flow into and out of particular systems. So when we were thinking about the checkout flow, we said, how can we incorporate some of these great ideas? So we drew very heavily on this diagram as well as others like it to develop the goal flow reports. The goal flow reports show for a particular conversion funnel or some series of pages that lead to an action that you want people to take on your site, and it shows exactly where the drop-off is happening. I'm not sure if it's showing up so great there, but you can see there are like little connections here. So it shows exactly where people are coming in, where they're dropping off, and you can optimize based on that. So the standard, the classic conversion funnel is from product page to view the shopping cart, placing an order, logging in, and eventually buying something. So I think that from our own personal experience, we probably know some websites do this a lot better than others. Amazon is amazing at this. It's really seamless if you've ever bought something on Amazon. Some of the airlines might not do it so well, and they could probably benefit from a visualization like this. So in Google Analytics, you would define particular steps that would lead to some action. So those are that's called the funnel, and then lead to the conversion. And then you can use this visualization to see where people are coming in the funnel, where they're leaving, and potentially figure out why people are leaving in particular areas and optimize those pages or those steps. And here you have, we've sorted it by browser, so you can click at a particular browser and see if it's different. You can do the same sort of thing for different sources, Google and Yahoo, Bing, whatever, and a whole host of other dimensions. There's also the visitors flow, which is a little bit more general, which shows just flow around your entire website, not a particular funnel. So this is if you don't even know what the funnel is. I don't even know where people are supposed to be going. You can use the visitors flow to tell you where people are moving around your entire website. So Google Analytics collects a lot of data. We've talked about this. But it doesn't collect everything. So in particular, Google Analytics does not collect weather information. Right? So you're probably like, okay, why would Google Analytics collect weather data? And that's exactly what we said. I don't think the conversation ever even happened. Should we collect weather data and put it? No. So no weather data in Google Analytics. But for some businesses, it actually might matter. So for travel, for example, we were recently working with a travel company. They say, do sales for beach vacations increase on rainy days? It's a perfectly reasonable question, and it's something that you might want to answer with web analytics. So there's a more advanced feature in Google Analytics called custom variables, which actually allow you to pass any information that you want into Google Analytics, and it'll be sent along with that GIF request with all the other data. So what this company did was they took one of the weather site's APIs, and from that pulled the location, the weather and the location of the user. So they said, okay, this user's from New York. Let's pull the current weather. Is it sunny? Is it cloudy? Is it rainy? What's the temperature? So they passed in, whether it was sunny or cloudy and what the temperature was, and sent that into Google Analytics. So now they could actually segment on a cloudy day or on a sunny day and see sales as they differ across the different weather channels. So really, when it comes to what's called custom variables, this feature, the possibilities are endless. You could pass in any sort of information that you want. It can be as dynamic as you want it to be. It's often used to, you can increment things, so it's like a visitor count, something like that. So there's a lot of really interesting use cases for custom variables. Any questions before I? pause here. Okay, we're okay for now. Okay, so but say you forgot to do this, or you thought of that, you had this stroke of genius afterwards, and you say, I want to track the weather, but you've already implemented Google Analytics, and you want to look at it for historic data. So that's actually, we've talked almost exclusively about the Google Analytics user interface, but there's also an API, which allows you to programmatically retrieve data using a number of different client libraries. So a perfect example is with the weather. If you didn't implement this custom variable, you still know we have historic records on weather, so we can look back using some other source that we might not have originally pulled into Google Analytics, and you can take your data out with the API and sync it up offline. So that is it's a use case definitely for the what we call the reporting API. Other things that people do with it are they automate reports. So if you're pulling the same reports over and over again, there are a number of features within the interface, such as the emailer and things like that. But you can use the API to do that, or if you're doing some sort of analysis over and over again. Another thing you can do is you can build an app and sell it or give it away for other people to use. So there's a whole host. We have an app gallery up on the Google Analytics website that shows a bunch of apps that people have built so to extend Google Analytics in various ways. So an example of this is one that pulls your data and puts it into Excel. So that's very popular. A lot of people like to analyze data in Excel. There's a whole host of apps that you can either use or build yourself if you're interested. So on the topic of apps, I told you guys I was going to talk a little bit about apps later on. That was the second in our quadrant there. So for a long time, web analytics and analysts have been analyzing app traffic. So now we're talking about mobile phones, iPhone, Android apps. So for a long time, people had been doing this, but they've been using web analytics technologies and terminologies as well. And the truth is, customer behavior is shockingly similar across a variety of different media, whether it's mobile or desktop and so forth and so on. The general habits are very similar, as they have been for years, really. But the terminology is different, the technologies are different, so we want to make sure that we get it right. Why are mobile apps important in the first place? We're data-driven, so I just want to show that people are spending a lot of time on mobile apps, and not just a lot of time, but they're also spending a lot of money as well, both in-app purchases and app revenue as well. So it's becoming a big business. So we released recently at Google I/O a whole new set of mobile app reports. So no longer are you looking at page views, you're looking at screen views. So it's a refreshed version of the Google Analytics interface that's made especially for mobile apps. So you can view how many new people downloaded your app, what devices they came from, many of the same things that you view in Google Analytics. You also view sources that they came from, same sort of thing, to download the app to the Google Play Store, things like that. So you can tag your links in the same way that we tagged our Times Square link in the QR code. You can see a whole host of different devices as well as networks and what versions they're using. So there's obviously a ton of versions of Android floating around there, so you can see both what devices and what version they're using. We also have flow visualization for app tracking, and what's neat about this one is it's integrated with any sort of event, or not just a load of a screen, but also particular events that you might someone might interact with, because apps tend to be a lot more interaction. It's especially important for apps. There's also a whole troubleshooting section that shows both crashes and any exception issues that you might have, so it helps you troubleshoot what's considered basically the worst possible user experience, which is when the app crashes. And just to go along with it, we have a new mobile app itself that reports on data and shows you what's happening on your site. So if you need to have some quick insights on the go, there's the Analytics mobile app. So that's more or less all I have prepared for now. I also wanted to make sure we leave time for questions as well as a live demo. So thank you very much again for having me. And yeah, I'm definitely going to stick around. We could potentially do a live demo and answer questions as well. Yes.
A lot of the apps don't require any online, so you can use it offline, but Google Analytics also can, is it able to track all your interactions?
So the question was, a lot of apps don't require you to be online. You can do it all while you're offline. So yes, so Google Analytics uses dispatching. So once the app goes back online, it'll store all that information and then send it all in one batch. Other questions? Yes?
The second part where you showed the app one, how do you access that? So what page would we go to access the app part, not the web page?
Yes, so it's actually a whole new sign-up flow. So when you create a new, what's called a web property, you'll have the option to create either an app or a web property. At that point, you will get the access to the SDKs for both Android and iOS, and then go from there. Yeah. Yes? Yeah, it's true. So the question was for information websites, not e-commerce websites. What are some good resources out there, as well as just general things that you can look at? Yeah, so one thing I would definitely look at is you might want to search for information related to publishers. So there's probably a lot of information out there about e-commerce, but then there's a ton of publishers out there and a ton of content for publishers. So newspapers and things like that. That it might not be exactly the type of website that you have, but a lot of the analysis that they do is much more centered around content as opposed to e-commerce. So honestly, even picking up some of the resources that's made for publishers, there's probably going to be a lot more of that out there than there would be for informational websites. Within Google Analytics, there's a whole content section. So it'll tell you things like all the pages that people visited, time on site for each one of those. And basically, from my experience, publishers live in that section and do a ton of different analysis there. As much stuff as there is e-commerce, there's a lot out there for publishers and publisher analytics as well. Yes? So if you have an informational website, what are some of the things within Google Analytics that you might want to look at? So certainly you do want to think about what information are people looking for, and are they able to find it? So it might be tying the organic searches, what are people looking for, and then looking at those particular visits and did they find it? So if somebody searched for tech briefing on August 3rd, you can see, did they actually see the page that talked about the tech briefing on August 3rd? So did they find what they were looking for? Or did they have to do a site search first to then search for that page and then they found it? So you might want to, you can use the visitors flow for that. You could see they were navigating around and they never found it, and then eventually they did a site search and then they found it. So it might not be as accessible as it should be. So think a lot about sort of user intent and are they able to find it? One thing that somebody had mentioned, so PDF downloads, I'm tracking those. Those are obviously popular on informational websites. So this would be under the feature called event tracking. So that's when on some sort of customized action, you send data to Google Analytics. So it would be on click of the PDF download, you say, okay, I'm going to send data to Google Analytics saying that they've just downloaded a PDF file, or at least click to the button to then download the PDF file. There's a few options for that. You can call it what's called a virtual page view, which will say that's actually a page view for me because I want to count that as same as any other page. Or you might want to track it as an event that says it's different, it's something that they do, but it's not a whole other page view. So to answer that question as well, for PDF downloads, it would be event tracking. Yes?
It sounds like there are a lot of implications here for the design of the website in the first place. So if you design the website in such a way that information appears on one page, but it's commonalities, but it's
Yeah, great question. So the question was, it seems like all of this information has implications for how you design your website, which you're absolutely right, it does. In particular, it was asked, would it be better to put more information on the homepage so that people can find things more readily? And are there resources for this type of thing? So that's a great question. There are a ton of resources out there for best practices in terms of website design. One was mentioned before. Google Webmaster Tools is also very popular among people who design websites. Really, what I would recommend is sort of doing this type of analysis and figuring out, are people finding things as they should. In terms of resources, there's not a ton of content out there for these informational websites, primarily because there's not really big bucks there. But I would recommend checking out the content for publishers, which is a lot more about keeping people on the site and making them find the relevant content for them. And you'll find a lot less about e-commerce and stuff among that content. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, right. That's a great question. Yeah, so the question was, you want to see where what your placement is, so whether you're first or second or third, but know that the search results might differ depending on whether you're in Palo Alto or somewhere else. So there's a few things. One is, I'll start with actually the better answer. The better answer is, if you use Google Webmaster Tools, there's an integration with Google Analytics. I'm not sure if it's on the Google Store, but we can check. And it'll actually tell you, for given keywords, how many impressions there were. So not just clicks, because Google Analytics will tell you how many people clicked and then came to your website. It'll tell you how many people actually saw. So if you search for Google Analytics but don't click on it, that would count as an impression but not a click. So it'll tell you that. It'll also tell you the average position, so whether it was first, second, third, so forth and so on, for the given query. And of some other information as well. It'll tell you clicks and stuff like that. So that's the Google Webmaster Tools integration with Google Analytics. That'll tell you exactly that in the standard interface with the reporting and everything else. For each given keyword, yep. So it's definitely, as a webmaster, it's definitely something that you should set up. The other thing I was going to say, which is a less official, not as good answer, but there are ways to spoof. There are probably some Chrome extensions that you can say, I'm coming from New York instead of San Francisco, or I'm coming from an Android phone, and people use that for testing and stuff like that. So that's sort of a much more haphazard way. But the official way would definitely be to use Webmaster Tools. Yes. Out of left field, okay. Sky Glue. So I have not. Maybe I should have. Rings a bell somewhere. It could be a third-party app. I'm not sure. Yeah. Any other questions? We could do I could do a demo, a walkthrough of the interface if people are interested. Might solicit some other questions. Yeah. All right. So. Okay. So here we have the Google Store account. So I'm in the standard reporting section. There's 3 sections here. There's the home, the standard reporting, and custom reporting. So within the standard reports, it tells you what we've collected, what we think are a set of the most valuable metrics and dimensions that people would use, and put them in the left-hand navigation here in these sections: audience, advertising, traffic sources, content, and conversion. So in each one, there's a different report. So, for example, we have the browser report, which tells us visits and other dimensions for various browsers. Up here, you can set the date range. So I've selected December 2011 just because it's Christmas time, and that gives us more interesting e-commerce data. Also on the top, you have a few options here for advanced segments: customize, email, export, and add to dashboard. So we'll talk about segments and customize a little bit later. Email is one that was one of the questions at the beginning, I think by a gentleman in the front row. So what you can do is you can send this particular report to any range of email addresses. They don't need to have access to the Google Analytics data or anything else like that. And you could set it for a CSV file, so like an Excel spreadsheet. You could also do a PDF, so they actually just see what you see on the screen. And you could set it for various frequencies, so daily, just once, weekly, monthly, quarterly, for different days of the week. Or if you set it for weekly or monthly, what day of the month, and things like that. You even have some advanced options like how long you continue to send it for. So if you're just looking to quickly get people data, that's one of the easiest, quickest ways. Yeah. Yeah. So worried that it might redirect into junk. What is the source email? So you see on the top here, it's from the email address of the account. So it hopefully will not be caught by the spam filter. Yeah. So when you log in, you use your username, and that would be the email that it's sent from. So we do that to hopefully detect that it's not spam. Yeah. Okay. So I'll walk you through a few of the other reports just as examples. So the traffic sources section, you can click direct traffic. We think that's important enough to call out that here's the landing pages that people landed on when directly navigating to the Google store, or clicking on a bookmark, which is basically the same. So we've got the search sections. You can see referrals. So a lot from Google.com, a lot from YouTube. We could see more results that are driving traffic to the Google store. Then we have the content sections, so relevant to a lot of the folks out here. So the Pages report is one of the most popular reports in Google Analytics. It tells you all of the pages that people saw, sorts by page views, time on page, how many were entrances, bounces. The exit rate is another one that people asked. So again, exit rate is calculated as the last page view that Google Analytics picked up data on. It just assumes that's where you left, which is usually a pretty good assumption. If you want to get a little bit more robust with that, we had mentioned this before, you can use outbound link tracking. So you can fire an event whenever someone clicks on a link to lead away from your website. So it gets you a little bit more granular of where people are actually exiting. Yes? Yes, exactly. Yeah, so the question was different bounce and exit. So exit is of all pages visits to that particular page, what percentage of them was it the last one? When did they leave? Bounce rate is when you land on a site, on a page, what percentage do you then immediately leave? So so bounce rate was first coming in on the first and then leaving. Exit would be just the last. Yeah, that's exactly right. So you can also sort by page title. Oftentimes the actual URL is not as easy to read. So here we know exactly which pages we're looking at. You can compare two metrics. So say page views to unique page views. Unique page views is the number of sessions that included a visit to the particular page. So if you visit a page 3 times, right, that's just one unique page view, whereas it would be 3 page views. You can also apply a secondary dimension. So say I want to see this by browser. Now I have you get a much more granular view. You get a lot of data that shows each page by browser. So there's all sorts of different analysis options. So you see that there. Another report that I actually didn't talk about that is very, very widely used is the site speed report. So this is something that also comes with the standard JavaScript snippet. It requires no customization. It tells you how long the page took to load. So the way it does this is it uses the HTML5 navigation timing feature. So you can look at particular pages and see how long did it take those pages to load. So the home page takes on average 2.6 seconds to load, and there's even a very much more technical section that tells you all sorts of things like redirect time and all sorts of other stats for developers to help them optimize the speed on the website. Yes? So the question is if you're so back to the page value there. Okay, so the question was if you're not using Google AdWords, can you still find out the page value? So page value is not actually related to Google AdWords. It's related to e-commerce. So if you're using e-commerce, then you can get that metric. If not, then not. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So multi-channel funnels, yeah. So that's a big one, I'm glad you asked about it because it's an important feature, and I didn't talk too much about it. So that's in the conversion sections under multi-channel funnels. So actually, it might help to take a look first at the traffic report. So if we look at the traffic report, we can see exactly how much revenue came from each traffic channel. So Google Organic, $41,000 in December. Google Referral, which is probably Gmail or just some other referral from a Google property, $18,000. Direct traffic, $45,000, and so forth and so on. But what this shows you is what's so-called last click attribution. So I click on a Google search Google organic search, and then I land on the site, and in that same session, I make a purchase. So that's sort of the default how it's been for years in the industry. But people started to say, that's really not quite right. It's kind of like a assist at a basketball game. It's not just the person who scores. It's the everyone else is it's a team player. So I might search for something, and then maybe someone will email me a link, and then I'll search again, and then I'll navigate directly, and then I'll buy something. So all of those other touch points should get some sort of credit for that ultimate conversion. So that's what multi-channel funnels is. So now we can take a look at the multi-channel funnels report, and the first thing you see is this little diagram here that shows that about 4% of conversions had both a touch point by organic search and direct. About 2% had organic search and some referral, and then about 0.5% had a touch point by organic search and referral and direct. So if we take a look at the top conversions path report, we can actually see what all these paths were. So the most popular one was organic search, and then organic search, and then a conversion. Then direct is another popular one. Organic search to direct is also very popular, in this particular case. So it shows you all of the touch points that ultimately lead to a conversion. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. So the question was, how does this then help you think about, figuring out the value of each one of these different, what do you do with it? So we have this metric called assisted conversions. And what that does is it tells how many, an assisted conversion would be anything not a last click. So if I come from organic search and then to something else and something else, the organic search would be an assisted conversion. So what you can see is how many assisted conversions and how much value is attributed to that assisted conversion, and it's not deduped, so it gets the full value there compared to the last click. And there's this assisted divided by last click interaction metric that will tell you if something is a more of an upper funnel, so-called upper funnel channel, such as social or display, are generally considered these more upper funnel media. And if it is that more upper funnel activity, then you can see that it'll have more assisted conversions. And then you might say, okay, so social, even though there's not as much last click, people aren't visiting social and then converting immediately, it has a lot of assisted conversions. So I might want to invest a little bit more in that particular channel. So those are some of the things that you start to do with this. Yes, all Google Analytics users have access to the multi-channel funnels reports. And one other note is actually just today we announced the multi-channel funnels API. So you can now get all of this data out of in programmatically out of Google Analytics as well. Yes. Custom filters. Okay, so there's a few different types of filters. Maybe do you mean the filters on the particular report, or? Yeah. Okay. So there's a filter on these reports. So the most basic thing that you can do is it acts almost as a search field. So say we search for shop, and it gives you all of this different any URL that has shop in it. But you can also click advanced, and you could do more things like include or exclude. A contain, by default it's containing, so if it matches any part of the string. You can say instead exactly matching. So this is going to come up empty because there's no such URL that's exactly matching shop. Ends with, begins with, also matching regular expression. So there's a lot of regular expression support within Google Analytics. If you want to become an advanced user, get familiar with regular expressions because they're really useful. So you can say something like shop or home and apply it. And now we see anything that has shop or home in there. So that's a little bit about advanced filters. It's basically it's basically just a way to remove rows from the report, if that makes sense. So that's a little bit about the standard reporting. I'll talk a little bit about custom reporting. So the standard reports are the combination of dimensions and metrics that we've thought are most valuable for you. But frankly, everybody's business is different. So there might be some sort of report that you have in mind that we just didn't think of. So you can create a new custom report from scratch, but one of my favorite features is you can take an existing report, so let's say the direct traffic report, and you can click the Customize button. So we'll be taken to the custom report, and here's exactly what the direct traffic report looks like. So I'll just click Save. So here's the direct traffic report, but now it's in my custom report section. And I can then edit it and see its traffic type equals direct. But say I don't want, I like all the metrics, but I don't want just traffic type equals direct. So I'll get rid of that. And now it's no longer a direct traffic report. I should change the name. It's just really a kind of an all traffic report plus the landing page. So now when you click into a particular landing page, what it gives you is just that same landing page. So it's not that useful. So one thing you might want to do is you might want to change the dimension drill down. So maybe when I click into that, I see date instead. So let's save that. And then when I click into that, now I see the dates instead. So these are various dates. You can sort by it. So on August 2nd, that's how many visits. On August 1st, and so forth and so on. So you can customize this report really to your heart's content. Maybe we'll walk through the customization options a little bit. So you have these different metric groups. So those each correspond to these tabs. these tabs in up top here that display various different metrics across this same landing page dimension. Then you have the landing page dimension and drill down. So when you click into it, what happens? So what data do you see? So we changed it to date. So when you click into the landing page, you see date. But we could change that to be anything, and you could even have a third dimension drill down so that when you click into date, you see some other dimension. And then you could add filters that, again, act as more or less removing rows. One subtle difference, though, is that with custom reports, it's removing rows that might not actually exist on the report. So in this example, you have landing page, and we had filtered to only include direct. So direct traffic is not a row in that report, but it still removes anything that's not direct traffic. So custom reports are very, very powerful. The great thing is you can rename them. I'll say, Andy's new report. You could save it, and then you can copy it. You can share it with other people. So I've created this really cool custom report. I'll share it, and you get a link. Most of the power users spend a lot of time in custom reports. So the best way, I think, to start to get familiar with them is to use that customize button. It's not on all of the reports, but it's on a good number of them, and start to play around and just a little bit and go from there. Any questions on custom reports? And the few minutes that we have remaining, talk a little bit about the home section. So one of the coolest features that I haven't mentioned is real time. So this shows how many people are on the Google Store right now. So there's 31. So for those that one of our favorite things to do, if you want, you could, if you have your laptop out, you can navigate to the Google Store, and we'll see it increment a little bit. So this tells you exactly how many people are on the Google Store right now, as well as the locations that they're at. So it looks like one person just navigated to the googlestore.com. You can also see where they're coming from, organic, direct. A few more people are navigating. We've only got a few laptops out here. So the question is, can you find out where the users are from? And the answer is yes. So you can do this both in real time and in the standard reports. You can get down to the city level. So you can see country, state, and then ultimately city. And then you can, it's another dimension that's automatically picked up, and correlate that with everything else that's happening on the website. And you can also see in real time what content people are seeing. So what pages are they actually on right now? Intelligence events, this is where you find the custom alerts that we talked about a little bit before. And finally, dashboards. So you can create these dashboards for quick, easy viewing of the data. It'll look something like this. As you notice from the standard report, you can add to dashboard whatever it is that you're looking at. So I don't think I have a dashboard, but there you go. So I think we're more or less at time, Don. Yeah. But any final questions? I'll stick around for a few minutes after if you have any burning questions. Yeah. So can you get people's IP addresses or anything more than city? The answer is no. Google Analytics does not collect any personally identifiable information, and IP addresses is considered personally identifiable information. So the lowest level you can get is city. Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh. So the question is about in-page analytics. So in-page analytics is a tool that actually shows you where on the page people are clicking, as opposed to just a list. And sometimes the data seems funny. So there are a few conditions that need to be met for in-page analytics to really work well. So it's possible that some of those aren't being met. I'd have to take a look at the exact configuration to figure out. All right. right, great. Well, thank you very much again, everybody. Thank you, Don, and hope you guys learned something today.